Hey everyone, it's Dave. How you doing? Just some quick business before we get going here with the podcast. This is the last podcast of 2019. I guess this is the last podcast of the decade. And I'm definitely looking forward to 2020 with a lot of hope. I think there could be a lot of good things coming. But, you know, as we've seen in the last few years, we don't really know how things are going to work out. So hopefully I'll be getting some more podcast episodes up here at Nobody's Knows, but who can be sure? I've been doing a lot of podcasting this year, just not as much podcasting for my own network. As you'll hear in today's episode, there's a new podcast called Cadence, One Step Beyond. It's the podcast for Aram ARSLANIAN's company, Cadence Leadership and Communication, and I've been engineering that podcast, recording and editing them and getting them ready to go. So if you go to the page for this episode at nobodiesknows.com and check that out, there's links to that podcast. You can hear the stuff we've been doing. It's very cool. There's 6 episodes up from 2019, and there's going to be many more episodes coming in the next year. So you can check that out. You can see photos of Aram and me. There's links for things that we discussed in the podcast. All the usual stuff is on there. It's part of the experience of the podcast that I intend for people to check out the page. So do that, and I'll pop back in at the end of the episode. But let's just get this thing going.
Here we go.
Okay, today we're going to do a check-in episode. We've got someone who has been on the podcast before, but who has not done a check-in episode yet, and that is going all the way back to 2015, all the way back to episode number 10, Aram ARSLANIAN. He's our guest today. What's going on, buddy?
What's up, my man? Dave, why was I episode 10?
Because it's episode X.
That's right.
Yeah. I have endeavored to make the numbers of the episodes make some kind of sense. So, 10, 24, 30. These have been, episodes with a point.
I like it. Good.
So I went ahead last night and listened to some of that episode. And one of the things I really enjoyed about it is that all the way through that 3 hours that we recorded, we had Miss Michaelanne Jerome sitting with us.
Yeah.
We're not recording in the same space today, and unfortunately, Michaelanne is in Europe currently, so she cannot sit in on this. We can't even get her to call in. So what I am going to do is isolate certain phrases and her laugh from episode 10, and at random points in this conversation, I will be editing that in as if she is sitting here with us. So I want you to just think of Michaelanne being here in spirit, and I'll make that happen after the fact.
I wish we had effects buttons that we could just be pressing right now.
You mean like that one?
Yeah, that was very well done.
Yeah, I don't actually understand all the effects buttons on this machine yet, so I haven't been using them. Okay, so, I don't know, Michaelanne, what'd you think of that?
I don't like it. Sorry.
We'll see how that shit works. It could be amazing.
We'll see how it plays.
She gets back on to be like, oh, by the way, you were in the new podcast with Aram. Would you like to hear something?
That's where we're at in society right now. We don't even need the person to be involved. We can just... That's what's changed since 2015. We don't even need people.
It's really kind of a podcast deepfake when you think about it.
Finally.
You like to do that sort of thing.
All right, so we're going to go over some of the things that have been going on in your life, but I wanted to bring up kind of coming in right off the bat. You told me something interesting today, which is you've been listening to a lot of a certain band lately, and they've been really kind of influencing you in your current day-to-day.
Yeah.
So what band was that?
This is amazing that you're bringing this up because I was just thinking about them earlier. I have been totally into Instead lately.
Instead.
Yeah. And, Instead, so I played in this band called The First Step. And Instead was like the main inspiration for The First Step. And so everyone that was in the band was like huge Instead fan. And I was always like pretty lukewarm on them. I really like the Will Make the Difference 7-inch. And when I say I liked it, I was like, yeah, I like it. It's good. I own a copy.
I know so many people that record just blew them away.
Yeah. Okay.
Introduced a lot of people to vegetarianism, which is incredibly powerful.
That song, Feel Their Pain, is like you think of Youth of Today, you think of No More, but I'm going to tell you, Feel Their Pain is like an unreal vegetarian song. But let me just step back.
Okay.
I never liked Bonds of Friendship. I always thought it was like, it's okay. And then What We Believe, the Epitaph record, I just didn't pay attention to it because it was on Epitaph and I thought it was weird. I don't know what I was thinking. For whatever reason, Instead did not connect with me until I was a 44-year-old man, which is some ass backward reason. You're literally laughing as I'm saying this. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, maybe I've finally gotten to a point where I can like, I've evolved or devolved, depending on how you view it, where like I look at it evolution, where it's like, this is the darkest period that I have been as a human being, where it's like the political scene is just Donald Trump is the president of America. Like it's a crazy time. And everyday conversations are so like dark and negative and the news is so sad and you don't want to turn away. You want to bear witness and you also want to be part of the change. At the end of the day, every single day, I have been emotionally exhausted because my job is also like really intense. And there's just something, I don't know how I ended up, but like Instead struck with me and I can't stop listening. And now I don't want to stop. I'm not trying to stop. I want more. I listen to Instead every single day. And I will say the Will Make the Difference 7-inch is iconic at this point for me. I think that's just one of the best hardcore records ever, but I love both LPs now too.
Yeah, we listened to a ton of the first LP of Bonds of Friendship in my skateboard shop when we were kids. And so I spent a lot of time with Instead early on, before the 7-inch.
So I want to give a shout out to those dudes from Instead. They're super cool, really, really good guys. They took Betrayed out for some shows and they're awesome. They're just totally cool dudes. And when we played with them, it was awesome. It was cool and they were great. And a lot of those guys they're all still about what they're about. And most of them are still straight edge and vegetarian, which huge respect.
That's huge.
I also love just how they've done their band, like they could do a reunion and then walk away from it. Like the reunion doesn't have to be, oh, now we do this, like we play 20 shows a year or something. They're like, oh no, we did it. We went to Europe. We didn't get a chance to do it. And it's not a good or bad reunion. It's like people are going to do what they want to do. It's your band. Just the deepest level of respect to Instead, start to finish, including your reunions. You guys are sick and I love you guys as people and as a band.
Michaelanne, what do you think of Instead?
It just spoke to me.
Oh, I didn't have any idea you were into them.
Strangely, yes.
Michaelanne, would you say that's what you believe?
Right.
No, I think that's really cool. I love that we have all of this history with all of these different bands, and you can just forget that you loved a band, and they just come back and you realize while you're listening to old music or you get something stuck in your head. This is what happens to me. I get a phrase stuck in my head that's from lyrics and I can't remember which band it is.
Yeah.
So sometimes what I'll do is I'll go type that into a search engine, try not to just say that, and in quotes, and there's all these lyric sites, so the lyrics will pop up and then I'll remember, and then that will send me down a rabbit hole of that band and other bands like it. It's such a great way to reconnect with stuff,
Oh man, totally. There's something that since we're talking about this and we're talking about Instead, when people are like, oh, youth crew hardcore, it's so corny and it's so Boy Scout and it's so positive.
Yeah, I've been hearing those things for a while in my life.
At least a couple times.
A couple times, yeah.
How much more relevant is that stuff now than ever? I find it's just such a dark time that we're in. Really, bad stuff is happening, and it takes a lot of courage just to immerse yourself and not hide from it. Why wouldn't I want to listen to bands with a positive message? And I'm not doing this. I'm not honking off on this whole PMA, this or that. I just want to be really fundamental, uniform choice, unity, Youth of Today, Bold, Wide Awake, Instead. These are bands that have a message that actually I can relate to as being yeah, that's actually a good way of thinking about things.
Yeah.
But it's funny because it's people are not people, but there's an opinion that stuff's corny.
Sure.
I would argue that it's probably some of the most pragmatic thinking for a troubled world that's much more centered on like, hey, day-to-day thinking, this is why I've always been more drawn to that kind of stuff, because I'm more solution focused or I guess hopeful thinking focused. But that's really stood out to me a lot lately is listening to that kind of music. I also listen to like death metal and Slayer. So.
Well, sure. But the stuff you're talking about specifically is almost like a gateway drug. Like you get in with those simple things, you get, whatever band touches you. Maybe you're even if you're just into the look, like this whole idea that like, oh, they're more about a costume, they're more about an outfit than a uniform, right? But see, though, usually you then go further, right? You get to 7 seconds, or you get to whatever. You get into more political stuff. Yeah. Back in our day, we loved Downcast, and then we're reading the inserts. Another thing you and I talked about earlier. How many ideas did I get from that early abolition stuff?
Totally.
So, or just. Even if I didn't agree with them, they challenged my thinking and caused me to come to understandings about what I did believe and agree with.
Yeah.
So the thing is, these are a gateway. But then when I go through the gateway, like I don't then start talking trash about the fact that the door was open. Look back at the door and say, fuck you, door. No, the door was awesome. The door was great.
Totally, man.
Thank God for the door.
Yes.
In fact, maybe I want to go look at the door. Like maybe I you use the door multiple times, whatever the deal is. And when things recede, you're talking about how bad things are right now. In some ways, the wave of progress crashed and rolled back. And so those simple tentpole messages need to still be there.
Yes.
To say, center yourself around this and go again.
This is what I like about it. It's really simple. Also, so we like the door. We can say we like the door.
Yeah.
We think the door is great. Do we find it adorable?
This happens at least once every time we see you.
Yes.
I don't know if Michaelanne's going to be able to handle much more of this.
Okay, dude. This friend of mine, Jeff Sims, shout out to Jeff. Jeff said something recently. We were chatting back and forth, a bunch of us on this group chat, and we were talking about a whole bunch of stuff like reunion bands and this and that and what's cool, what's corny, like kind of like people who are really into these kind of very simple bands that have these seemingly very simple messages, which I actually think are pretty profound. Like going back to Instead, like We'll Make the Difference. There's stuff on there that's actually really profound that, yeah, maybe it was written by a 20-year-old person, but it's like really deep, at least for me. So we're going back and forth. And when you said, oh, people can say it's all just about the fashion and having an X watch and having a certain look. Yeah, it can be both. You can have people that really, truly believe these things and who are totally part of a scene and they want to fit in and they're doing something that's popular, and people can be both. And basically what Jeff's point was, hey man, I'm like a grown adult at this point. Like, we have kids, we have families, we have careers. We're a composite of both incredible things, totally genuine, and terrible and phony and inauthentic. We're all parts of this. I would rather someone see the best in me. So if I want people to see the best in me, I have to make the effort to see the best in other people. So yeah, I could look at those bands and be like, it was a time, it was a space. It was an era where being straight edge and vegetarian and positive and all that stuff, that was cool. So it was easier to do. So yeah, there was a fashion element of it. And it doesn't mean that makes their message less. If anything, I want to see the best in those people. And as they're playing in bands now, I want to see the best in them now. So do I think it's sick that Youth of Today are doing a bunch of reunions? Yeah, with that in mind, I think it's awesome because I think Youth of Today's message is more important now than ever. So it was really great thinking from Jeff because it really pushed me to kind of examine where I was coming from with my thinking because I was being a little negative on this chat, and it really pushed me to think like, actually, yeah, I think it's sick that all these things are happening. I'd rather have more positive messages than less.
I agree. I mean, you hit on like one of my main themes, which is what you'd said right there, whether it came from Jeff or whether it was your version of what he said, is that it's not that we're one of these things or the other. We're a combination. It's like, it's not no but, it's yes and.
Yeah.
It's like improv comedy has the answer to life in it. And that's accept the thing and then add to it.
Yeah.
It's so many arguments that people have right now are And I'm not talking about the big left versus right, like racism versus like, equality. I'm talking about things like someone's mad about something someone did. And so they say, therefore, all the bad things about that person, or all the bad things about that situation, or all the bad things about the influence of that movie, rather than saying, hey, we can consider this negative aspect and we can add that to our understanding of the good things about this thing and understand that everything's complicated. And so it's this real kind of like, I try to just find this Zen middle ground on things, and try, whenever possible, except for when it's a completely unacceptable situation.
Yeah.
I try to find a balance in these ideas. Okay, man. So that's instead. What else? So you said you told me you've been listening to Instead, and you've been listening to a lot of metal. And that's not, I don't hate it. It's not my normal thing that I listen to. I usually tend to trend in, wimpier directions with the music that I'm listening to. But real quick, for the people who will appreciate it, tell me about the metal stuff you've been listening to.
Well, so I just want to start by saying that my metal and thrash kind of stuff, it's really stuck in kind of like more of like a thrash metal kind of thing. So like on constant rotation would be stuff like Slayer. And, I like things that are along those lines. I'm going to tell you something that I've really gotten into lately. The new Slipknot record is really good. And I can't stop listening to it.
Would you say that that's something that people say every time there's a new Slipknot record?
I think it is. And I want to be clear. Like, I just like Slipknot.
I don't know how many Slipknot records there are, but I definitely remember being part of the conversation with the first record.
Yeah.
Because it was good.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I thought it was good. I owned it. I saw them. Well, no, I had a chance to see them at Ozfest. I didn't know yet that I would want to.
Yeah.
I was there to see Black Sabbath and Primus.
Yeah.
And Slayer played, and they were not good. I was also there alone, no other hardcore dudes, and there was a literal Nazi skinhead with a giant swastika tattoo in the pit. I've talked about this on this before, and I wasn't going to fight that person alone, but really wished that my crew just like walked down at that point, because
you wish the Edge of Quarrel happened.
Everybody else was just leaving this person alone.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens. Yeah. The masses just go, it's not my thing. No, I'm sorry. You need to smash that. That imagery needs to be smashed.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But then the next record came out. What was the next record after the first Slipknot record? It had the name of a state. Is it Iowa?
Iowa.
And I remember Mr. Bill Baker championing that one a lot. And he played it for me, and I went, you're right.
Okay, but the way you just reacted, that's it. Like, I don't know. Okay. You remember last time we talked about like, don't be a poser, right? And it's like, it's poserish to not just say what you like because you're trying to like hide something.
Their imagery
is awful.
Forces this conversation.
I know. I don't want to be into a band where a bunch of people wear like goofy masks and jump around. These records are really good though.
What if there were a really, really good Juggalo band?
I don't know what to tell you, man. Like,
here's the thing. Is it Slipknot?
No, they're not a Juggalo band.
Why?
Wait, you're putting me in a position where I'm starting to defend this band, and I'm not going to do that either. So I'm not for nor against them, and I'm not going to be their spokesperson. I don't know anything about Although I appreciate the move that you just tried to pull on me, that's not going to happen. I'm just going to say this. Despite my generally good taste, I really like every Slipknot record, period.
So I have no idea how many Slipknot records there are after that second record, or if they're any good. I have no idea.
They're really good.
Okay, so they just kept making the same music and doing what they did.
Yeah, and you know what? I believe all of their records are celebrated.
Now they're
good records.
Let's revisit something here because you felt it was personal, and it's not. Would a really good Juggalo band be Slipknot?
I don't know. I'm not going to entertain this conversation.
You don't even want to go there.
No, I don't want to do that.
But that's the problem because they seem like they'd be a Juggalo band by visuals.
I'm not. I can't speak for that world.
Aram, do you know how magnets work? Okay, so this is a check-in episode. So we're going to check in with what you've been doing since the last time we had you on the show. And by we, I mean Michaelanne and I. You have started a business and started a new band, both of which are important influences in your life at the moment. Which one do you want to talk about first?
I want to talk about my daughter first.
Oh, hey, well done, by the way. Let's just say there's 2 minor influences in your life and 1 really major influence in your life right now that is important. And I wanted to ask you 2 questions that I think it's the same question, but I think you could answer it differently depending on how it's asked. And it's, what has changed about the way you view life from having a child, and what has changed about the way you view life from having a daughter?
Okay, those are both good. So let me just say, my daughter, at the time of this recording, she's 17 months, and she's the coolest. Like, I always wanted to have a kid, and I've been very career-minded. I've been very, before I've been playing in bands, and I've always, people may or may not know about me is, even though I was playing with all these bands all this time, I maintained a professional career. So for some people, not for everyone, but I'd say for a lot of like people who are in like quote unquote bands and they're touring a lot, they probably start their professional career afterwards, but I had mine the whole time. So I'm at like kind of like the 3rd stage of my career at this point. And because of the way that I've lived life and the pace that I've lived it, I've never been able to really have a kid before, like have that time. And, we had our daughter 17 months ago, and she's just like, it's all the things that people say. Like, you're like, I can't imagine loving someone as much as I love this child. It's unbelievable. So the way it's changed my life, I think of everything in the long term now. And of course I thought of things in the long term before. It's like you think about life, but now I think about my life all the way up into the end of what my life may be, and all the things I need to do to make sure that my daughter has the best life possible. All the way I need to set up my life. But then not only do I think of the end of my life, up into the end of my life, I also think into her life and like her going to school and her having a partner and her whatever choices. It's like my scope of how many years ahead has now extended by a whole other lifetime, because I want to think of every single thing I do has got to be about creating some kind of better path for her forward. And I know it might sound strange to think everything I do, but I mean, even just like self-care, like, like feeling good about life and taking care of myself physically. And so not just like saving money, but like just being happy. And I want to move past just simple ideas like being a good person, like be the person your kid wishes you'd be. Like, okay, that's fine, but I'm a human being. Like I'm thinking about like, I think about her in everything I do. And I've never experienced that before. So that's changed the way I think around having a daughter. So one of the things that if you go across like interviews with me or zines or anything like that, I've always been very consistent on my stance of how I believe society and then men and people in the hardcore scene and all that, the kinds of thinking and the ways that we need to adjust around the way that society interacts with women. And I just want to be clear that like having a daughter, while it hasn't changed that, it has really made me think heavily about how much more I can do and like how I can be more in the game, how I can push myself more and the kinds of conversations, because I want her to grow up in a fundamentally better world than people have.
That is awesome. And I have a number of friends who have had children recently. A bunch of my close friends all decided to have daughters all within a few months of each other. So I'm getting to see this kind of new way of looking at the world through the eyes of basically like 3 of my closest friends. And it's been inspiring. It's been good seeing you all rise to the occasion.
It's cool, man. Like I'm a legit old dad. I'm 45 and we had our daughter last year, so it was 44 at the time, but I'm an old dad. And I guess there's something cool about that. Like it's neat to be in your 40s and having a kid and really thinking like I'm just in a different place in my career, my life. I'm a lot more settled in myself than I would have been if I had a kid 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a neat experience for sure. And she's like, yeah, she's awesome. Really cool.
Awesome. What's her name?
Leora. And I also say like having a kid changes the way that you think about like peer poop. Like,
oh, really?
Well, yeah, because like when you're young, you're like, ew, peer poo, like gross. And then let's say you have a dog, then you're used to picking up a dog's poop or cleaning up their pee. But if you have a kid, that kid is going to like pee or poo on you. And it's not going to be a thing that happened that one time. It's like, oh yeah, this happens.
Yeah.
And, you're dealing with like poop every day and pee every day, and you're going to be for a long time. And in many ways, it desensitizes you to how gross it is. So it's like, my thought on pee and poo is just like, whatever at this point, where it's like maybe 5 years ago, but like, ew, pee.
I mean, it's probably a more reasonable, since everyone has to deal with it.
Totally.
Probably makes you more reasonable.
But it's a good march, because let's say you start without, like, I didn't grow up with pets. So like no pets, like pee or poo. It's like, oh my God. It's like the main offender. Like, how dare you get that away? And then you get some dogs and you're like, ew, gross. Like Blue peed on the floor, pooed on the floor. And it's like, ew, but it's pretty infrequent. Then you have a kid and you're like, meh, pee, like whatever.
Okay. So that's the family life that we've gone over real quick here. Why don't you tell me what's going on in your professional life?
All right. So last time I talked to you, I was a vice president of a company that I'd worked in for about 4.5 years. And I worked for it for about another year. And then I started my own. So I started my own company called Cadence Leadership and Communication. And the reason I started it was the company I worked for before is one of those things where you're just like, yeah, it's fine. But you've known me for a long time. Nothing with me is like, it's fine.
No, I've seen you scrutinize record covers that anyone else I've ever met would say were perfect, and you've sent them back to be reprinted.
Yeah, because I firmly believe if you're going to do something, you do it the best you possibly can. If you're going to position yourself as being a steward of people's careers, that you're there to help people become better leaders, and you're there to help companies be good companies, then do that thing. And that's what I do. So I started a company. I started it just by myself. So I did something that I think a lot of people would consider to be a huge mistake. I was partner track. Essentially, if I just sat in this role and kept my mouth shut, I would be a partner in that company now, and I'd be making a lot of money. I don't do things for money. That's not why I do things. It's not what makes me tick. I do things because I care about making things better. So I started my own company, and I did it with just me and a notebook and a cell phone. And within the first year, I had hired 2 people. By the second year, I'd hired a few more. We're just crossing year 3. I've got 11 people that work all across North America. We work in like across industries and tons of different industries. And we're making like an actual difference. And one of the things I want to say here is risk-taking is essential for good careers. Don't worry about the money. And I know it's like, oh, well, I have to live. The money will come. I promise you the money will come. Take smart risks. Take a leap. Don't worry if you can't see the ground. If you really have the stuff and you're really good at what you do, the money is going to be there. Focus on doing good work for the right reasons, and that's how you get there. So what we do leadership coaching and communication skill set building. So I'd break it down to mindset and skill set. We work with people about who they are as leaders, how they lead, how they connect to people, how they understand people. So are you someone who can create the right kind of environment on your team where all sorts of people are welcome? Can you lead those people effectively? Can you inspire them to do really good work and work collaboratively and have that right kind of setting? So that's what we do from a mindset perspective. And that's about as much as not just understanding other people, but also understanding yourself. And it's a real interesting place to play in that space because it's equal parts psychology as it is just street smarts. Then the other side, which is the skill set, it's about teaching people the actual skills of leadership, actual communication skills, like how to write a great email, how to have a difficult conversation. And it's awesome, man. The company is filled with incredible people. Almost everyone that works there is from the punk scene. There's 2 people who aren't from the punk scene. They're the newest people. And they're kind of laughing because we were all clearly from a similar scene. There's like 4 people that are straight edge. There's, I think, like 5 of us are vegans. Most of us are vegetarians. And it's not what you need to do to be a part of the company, but it's certainly part of the company.
Right. I mean, you're bringing people on who you know and understand, and you know that they'll fit the culture of the company that you're building.
Yeah. One of the funniest things that anyone ever said to me was our friend Bob, Bob Swift, who we love. He was like, Aram, somehow every Saturday I find myself at Larson's house packing records for you for free. So I'm essentially working for you for free. And every Saturday I'm excited to do it and I can't wait to do it. And every Sunday I'm like, I just put in 8 hours working for that guy. How did that happen?
This was React Records days. This is still a few years back.
Totally.
But yeah, no, a lot of us did.
Yeah, but
Now, do you realize some of those work parties also happened when you weren't even there?
I know.
And we'd be looking at each other like, yep, just doing Ram's work.
But here's the idea, and I want to be clear. Something that I am good at is bringing people together for a purpose. And I'm not going to sit on the sidelines of my life. If you don't want to do that, then don't do that. But if you do it, then do it. And that's what I do. I bring people together for a purpose and create things. And those things are typically cool things that help other people. And so when Bob's saying that, he was saying it as a joke, but also a little bit oh, damn, how do you do that? You do that because I believe in things. I really believe. I believed in React Records when I was doing it. I believe in all of the bands that we played in. I believe in that stuff. And if you believe, other people are going to believe.
And none of us were going to be there helping you with any of that stuff if we didn't believe in what you were doing. Totally. This isn't the same thing as we were working an assembly line, making widgets for your corporation.
Totally.
We were folding up essays about straight edge or about issues within hardcore and punk rock so that every record that you sent out would have this message included.
Totally.
We were doing things that, and it's not like you got rich on the back end of it. No. It was it's a punk rock record label. It's just the stuff that people wanted to do. So it's certainly none of your team members now are just coming over on a Saturday and working for you for free to be part of your thing. But it's the same. I'm assuming you've taken some of that same spirit and energy and put it into the...
Totally. And if there's a piece of advice I have for anyone, listen, when you're someone like me, you have a real choice. You can be someone who tries to manage it and keep everyone happy, and you are going to find yourself in a never-ending spiral of chaos. Because if you're a big personality, people are going to like you or they're not. And if you get too caught up in that, then you're screwed. One of the things, and I'd say especially since we last did this one, that I've really come to embrace is man, I'm just who I am. And what I do is I bring people together to get things done. And I believe in those things. So when I was a therapist, I believed in really working in the community and creating real help. And we did that. And I was very focused on it. And I believe we did some very good work. When I was playing in punk bands and doing the record label, I believed in those things. And we did some cool stuff. And now in my job, I believe in what we're doing and we do some cool stuff. And I still believe in all three. The reason I split it up like that is I'm also not trying to drink from the same well that I've been drinking from all my life. I believe in progress. You have to progress as a person. So I could still play in a punk band. I could still put out records, but that's not the only thing I do. I want to keep growing and pushing myself as a person. And that's again, part of that progress. So again, I'm going to say to anyone, if you are a person that is drawn to being like that, then just be it. Just do it. Don't worry about managing what other people think, because if you do it, and I've done that in my life a lot, I've really found my stride within the past few years, which is just do you. Do your thing and make a difference the way that you can.
Awesome. Well, I know from watching you go through all of this stuff, I know you practice what you preach here. This is definitely you. Mm-hmm. And it's good. I mean, people need to hear it, I think. Sometimes I look at the stuff that you do and I think, why did he even think he could do that? And then you get it done and I'm like, well, because he's a Ram. He's just, of course it worked. Because I don't know any other truly relentless madman that goes down the same way you do, that goes down the avenues the way you do.
Thank you.
Which is a huge compliment.
I'll take it as one.
Yeah, that's how it should be.
Well, dude, because I'm not I don't know how to explain it. One of the things I've struggled with a lot in my life is trying to keep, I want people around. I've always wanted people to like me, really like me. And it's just growing up, all the stuff we talked about last time, feeling really insecure, really lost, really alone. And I'd say one of the biggest gifts that I've kind of started getting better at now is just being hey, it's all cool. Like you're in, you're out, whatever it is. I can't manage stuff for people anymore. I'm not going to manage any of these things. And I'm not even going to think about not managing it. I'm just going to do the thing that I want to do. Trying to do the thing that you want to do and keep everyone happy, that's like a life killer. Doing the thing you want to do because you believe it's the right thing, that's a life maker. And I am really interested in doing the things that I want to do because I believe they're the right thing and I genuinely believe they're helpful to people. And with that, it's like, man, if you're not in, don't be in, and that's okay.
So one of the things you've done in conjunction with your business is you've just started a podcast.
Yeah, totally.
And do you see that as an extension? Like on the outside, looking in at it, it wouldn't, like it's not a commercial venture to do the podcast. It doesn't have advertising.
No.
And you're not necessarily, it's not like you're teaching the things that your company does. Mm-mm. You are talking around issues that can affect people who are in the positions of the people that you help.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good way to describe what your podcast is? Mm-hmm. It's called One Step Beyond.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and there's going to be links to that in the page for this podcast. I think people should check it out because there's some very, very cool things. And it's a different kind of podcast than this. It's not a social podcast, but it has a lot of issues. Each one is different. So you could see if any of those issues seem to relate to something in your life, but you could also pick any of them at random and hear advice that you didn't know was going to be relevant to some part of your life.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Thank you.
You bet. So I just wanted to ask, how has that experience been being a podcast host?
It's awesome. So it's weird because there's days where I'm like, oh, that's it. I totally got it. And then I listen back. I'm like, oh, what the hell was I thinking? And there's other days where I'm like, yeah, that sucked. And then I was like, oh, that was awesome. So being the host, I'm a little up and down on, but the subjects are what I'm super into. So like, I like to think of it as, imagine if you had a boss that you really didn't like. You're like, oh, that person is terrible. This podcast is for them.
It's for the boss you don't like?
It's for the boss you like, or the boss that you hope more for, or the boss that you hope to have someday who's going to be that person who really makes a difference for you. This podcast is intended to push people's thinking. So like, for example, we just did one on addiction. There are people right now who are addicts. They live with addiction and they're working in the workplace and their boss does not understand what to do. Right now, their boss does not know what to do with someone who's got an issue with addiction. I want the person who's an addict and their boss to listen to this. There's one on people who have experienced trauma returning to the workplace. Mm-hmm. In those cases, I want the person who's experienced that trauma to know that their bosses listen to this and they're going to have some kind of it's going to help them in their approach to working with people. So the idea is to take really hard topics, break them open, and try and create this learning where people can apply it to their leadership and to their work experience. And again, like I wasn't going to do a podcast that was like, I don't know, like some corny ass thing. I wanted to do something that was like meaningful to people. And because I am able to play in that place because I have a background as a therapist, I can have these conversations. And I've been like, I am a guy who runs a business, like a real business. And so I don't want to sit on the sidelines and just like shout out a bunch of slogans because I played in punk bands. I'm in the mix and I'm going to do stuff. So I'm going to have the real conversations. Whether I'm right or I'm wrong about these things, time's going to tell, but I'm not going to sit on the sidelines. And that's why I did the podcast. And it's cool. I've been really enjoying it. It's challenging though, because there's definitely times where I'm like, what the hell am I talking about? But I believe it's pretty good.
I feel like the podcast is the essay and the record.
Yeah, man. Yes. Yeah. It's like
your business puts out a product.
Yeah.
And it is not enough for you to have just a product. You need to add something that can affect change.
Dude, okay. Yes. So can I tell you about the essays? So, and for anyone who didn't know this, I used to run a record label called React Records, and we used to put essays out in all of the records. And at one point, the bands started pushing back. And I remember this one band that wanted to do a record. They're like, could we do an essay on something dark? It's like, yeah, man, I'm not trying to push your aesthetic. Like, cool. Yeah, like cool, you're trying to be like, you want to have this aesthetic. No, we can't, because that's not what this record label's about. And then I was getting some pushback. It's like, oh, these were a little corny. It's not what we want to do. I'm going to tell you that's around the time I became disinterested in doing React. Because doing a record on the record label that I was running is not doing a record on someone else's record label where they're just pushing out a product.
Yeah.
And not good or bad. Like, I'm not going to take anyone from anyone else's record label. Like, record labels are cool. Doing a record with me means the creative process does not begin and end with you. I am going to be part of that creative process because part of the record label is my voice. So when bands started like having some issues with that, it's like, you're probably on the wrong record label then. And that's cool. Like, go be on another record label. I don't want to just put a product out because I wasn't doing the record label as a business to like live off of. I was doing it as an expression of, I care about these bands. I think they're saying something important and I have something important to say. Or because for reference, I didn't write the essays. Other people wrote the essays. We'd get like guest writers for each one. I don't believe, at least for me, my punk experience has never been passive. It's always been active. And again, right, wrong, or indifferent, whatever your reaction to that stuff is, the storybook is not going to be that I entered into this scene and entered in as like some passive participant who was just like cool with whatever. I always felt it was important to talk about things that I believed in. And I'm not saying those things were perfectly articulated. And have there been times where I have been sanctimonious about my approaches? Absolutely. And there's been times where I've like had to really eat shit and be humbled and like have reality put in my face, and he had to learn and grow from it. I'm a better person for having done it. I'm going to say I don't play on the sidelines, and that's what my business today is, not playing on the sidelines. It's about creating real change in a place where I think is ripe for it, which is the corporate world. And so you're totally right. The podcast is 100% the essay inside of the record, like for sure. And that's how I think. It's all about how do we push this further.
Yeah, Michaelanne, what did you think about the essays?
It does not seem strange to me, but apparently that's strange.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You would think I would love it, though.
All right, so let's move on to I think the other major factor in your life right now, which is apparently it wasn't enough for you to have a daughter and start an awesome business and a podcast because you're also doing a band.
Yes.
I mean, imagine that, you in a band.
I know.
Tell me about your current band.
So I am singing in a band called Change. And we are a straight edge band and a vegetarian band. Well, I don't know. We're vegan.
Yeah, no, those lyrics are not vegetarian.
Yeah.
They're vegan.
Yeah, we're vegan. But like I don't want the connotation there. Like, we're a straight edge band. The people who recorded on the record, most of us are vegan.
Oh, sure. Oh, and some of us came up to sing backups on it, and you gave us the lines we were supposed to sing, and a couple of us looked at each other and said, is it all right for me to say this?
Yes, because if I'm going to use a TFS reference, even if someone doesn't come from the same place as being vegetarian or vegan, we set the conditions where people can at least consider it because we're being open with them and welcoming.
Well, certainly every one of us, at least that I came up with, supported that. Supported that idea. The idea of supporting you and what you were doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
So it was a lot of fun. We had a great
it was
great
cool
sing-along day. None of us had any idea what we were getting into.
Because none of you had heard, unlike most bands, you hadn't seen the band live, you hadn't heard the demo. You went in blind to sing backups on 13 songs.
Yes, and then you were saying things like, "Here comes the reggae one."
Wait till the record comes out.
and in the studio with headphones on in front of microphones with a crowd of people, we all went, "Oh shit, this is awesome." There's some stuff going on there.
Yeah.
There's some fantastic stuff that reminds me of a period of time in the early 90s where people were getting just a little experimental.
Yeah, okay. Like just to break it down for our audience, like straight up, this is a straight up hardcore record.
It's a phenomenal record.
Thank you.
It's yeah.
I'm real psyched. I am a firm. I know you're supposed to say this, but like I'm not like a musician, so I don't need to say this. I'll say like just frankly, I firmly believe it's the best record I've ever done. It's more in the pocket of it's certainly what I want to do now, which is straight up hardcore. It's real aggressive, but it's also super musical. The songs, I spent a lot of time writing these songs, and it wasn't like a solo process. So it's 13 songs. I wrote 12 of them. And when I say I wrote, what it is, I'd write the song, but then I'd bring it to the band. And it was me, Dave Mitchell, Alex, and Carl. And we would break the song down, rewrite it, and rewrite it again, and rewrite it again. So it's like, yeah, I wrote, like, quote unquote, wrote the songs, but without those guys, it wouldn't have gotten here because we had to like deconstruct it and make them cool. But then I wrote the lyrics, and then I wrote the lyrics again, and wrote the lyrics again. So I have 3 different sets of lyrics for each song. I recorded the vocals on the record twice, like all the way through twice. So it was a process, and I'd say it's just like, it's cool.
I'll be completely honest. You talked to me about this record for a long time, and there was a place where it crossed in my mind prior to my hearing it, where in my mind it crossed over to, oh no, Aram's at the stage where he's like one of these like musicians who now can now spend as much time in the studio as they want. They're writing their record for 2 years, or it's an author who spent way too long, and then you find out the book is like 100,000 pages too long. And like, what was that movie Wonder Boys where they said you've described the genealogy of the horses? Like, you know, it's like one of those things where I'm like, this can't be good.
Yeah.
Like, this can't be good. And I was completely wrong, because your type of approach, actually, it seemed these things benefited from it.
Yeah,
they don't feel overproduced. They don't feel forced in any way. It feels like the hardcore record I want.
Right on, man. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And like, just the method on this is like, I would be sitting in this like really intense meeting, let's say with like a CEO of this company and like of like some big billion-dollar company. And I'd be listening to what this person was saying. And then out of nowhere, I'd be like, oh, that's the change I need to make in this song. And like literally like making notes in my book and then moving on to a different page and being like, wow, do this 4 times in the song. So it really like the focus on writing this record was intense. And I didn't put down one thing on this record that I'm not like everything that's on the record. I'm like, yep, that's cool. Like I could have done it this way or that way, but I can say that I've never had a record where at the end I was like, yeah, I actually feel really good about every single thing on this record. And again, yeah, I'm sure it could be better. You know, it could be this or that, but it's the best that I could do at this stage of my life with the amount of time that I have to play in a band. And I'm real happy with it. One of the funny things though is, so if that was your experience as a guy just hearing me talk about it, imagine like the guys who played on the record. And when I would call them up, like, so we hadn't, let's say it's been like 8 months since we recorded or something. And I'd be like, hey, Dave, I need to get back in the studio. And he'd be like, what? I'm like, yeah, I need you to do some solos on the record. And he was like, well, what do you mean solos? And I'd be like, I'll tell you when you get here. So Dave is this like unbelievable guitar player, really good, way like because I can't play like that. I can envision what I want, but I can't play that way. Mm-hmm. So Dave is in the studio. I'm sitting on the couch at the studio, and a song would play, and he would do a solo. I was like, that's pretty good, but I want like 20% more Warzone and like 15% more Megadeth. And he would be like, dude, these are just vague reference points. I know what these bands sound like, but when you say that, it doesn't make any sense. I'm like, just do it. And he did it. Like, so I don't know who's right or wrong in this. Like, was he right? Was I right? Like, and like, there was tension in the room. Like, you could cut the tension because I was like, no. Like, what we really need here is like, you know, in this one Youth of Today song, Porcell played this like passage, and I want to capture that, but our version of it. And again, Dave would be like, that literally means nothing. But it meant something because he did it. He pulled it off.
Still, yeah.
So like, I don't know if it was like kudos to me for like somehow properly explaining it despite like being vague, or kudos to Dave for somehow being able to like decode the craziness that I was talking about. But if you think
there's more from column B than column A, but both columns contribute.
Absolutely. If you listen to those solos though, and if I was to say this solo came from my thinking on these 3 bands, I promise you'd be like, oh yeah, actually I can totally hear that.
Well, I mean, Michaelanne has heard everything you've done over the years, and playing this in the car, this was one of the rare times where something this hardcore actually appeals to her. And she specifically, well, I mean, it's funny because she's sitting right here. I mean, you agree, right, Michaelanne?
Yeah.
Yeah, see? She, like, but no, sitting in the car, I think she texted you, I love what did she say? I love the heavy metal parts.
I like the heavy metal parts.
Like, I like the heavy metal parts.
And what I like about this is like this record already sounds totally horrible to everybody.
Totally, but that's the thing. You have to understand. It's not. It's really good. And like, but what's cool about it is that those things that you're talking about that you added with the soul, like you say guitar solo to me, I say, I don't want to fucking hear it.
Yeah.
I do not like that stuff. There's a reason why I like punk and hardcore music that isn't noodly, you know? Like, so guitar solo has always felt wrong to me. And you and I have had this argument before.
Totally.
But what you've done on this record never bothers me. Awesome. It feels like it fits. And it's like that magic hour. Like you just found that place where a guy like me is not bothered by it. And someone like Michaelanne, it's the thing that makes her like it. So what an incredible middle ground.
Totally. And like the thing I was shooting for here is I just wanted it to be a record that I would listen to like when I was growing up, but also I'd listen to now. And a telltale thing for me about how I feel about this record is I actually listen to it because I actually like the songs. It's not like other times where I've written a record and I never listen to it again. Like I actually dig this and it's fun to listen to.
Like a chef enjoying your own food?
Yeah, basically. But you know, the funny thing is like I'm laughing as I'm recalling all this recording because like, well, I remember being in the studio with when we were recording and I was like, okay, Alex, I want you to play that drum beat that you just did, but play it backwards. And he would be like, that doesn't make any musical sense. And you press this little button to talk into the room and press it and be like, just do it. And he would do it because Alex is like this incredible drummer. And he's very like a very patient, like kind guy. So like these dudes are just humoring me. And some things, because I kind of like feel like I'm positioning myself as this like mad genius. Like half the things I said didn't work, but half of them did work.
Was it the things you're describing also mixed with like Dirk Diggler in the studio at Boogie Nights?
Yes.
Just like
yes, that's exactly. I mean, there's no other place this reference could go. But
were they feeling the heat?
Absolutely. It was cool. The dudes were great. And like none of those dudes are going to play in the band live. So like we did the record together. And I think like doing the record together was like a feat of strength. Like we got it done like, oh, and everyone just kind of puts down the weights and heads their different way. Like it's cool. Like we got the record done. I really appreciate those dudes.
But you are you do have a band that's going to play live.
Yeah, we got a band that's going to play live. Got some shows booked. So first the band is called Change. The record's called Closer Still. It's coming out on React in North America and Refuse in Europe. And then Australian label's doing like a tape version of it. We've got our first show in Seattle coming up next year. And then we have other plans that are being set in stone. And by the way, I'm not like out here trying to like do a band.
Next year, you mean early 2020?
Early 2020. I'm not out here like trying to do a band. You know, like again, I'm in my 40s, like mid 40s now. I got a family, like all those things. But just like anything, I like to do stuff. I like to be involved in things, and I love writing records. So I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do the appropriate amount of support for the record. And people are into it, cool. If they're not, that's fine.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I'm excited to see you play live.
I'm nervous. I haven't done it in a long time. It'll be cool. I'll have the next on my hand.
I like that part.
Yeah,
you know
me
why?
too.
Because straight edge is awesome.
Man, straight edge is super awesome. So the other day I was teaching a course out in Montreal, and my client had found our last episode and was like, I listened to a podcast. And I thought he meant the Cadence podcast. He's like, it's called I've Known You Too Long. And I was like, oh no, what did I say on that podcast? And he's like, so you're straight edge. That was the first thing he said. And I was like, yes,
in those 3 hours, that's what he took away from it.
I think we talked about it a lot.
Well, I mean, come on. Of course.
Yeah. So anything else you want to talk about, or is that it?
I think we're getting down to it.
Okay.
So we've talked about Instead, of course, and the how incredible it is, this lifetime of musical influence that we've had, how that can come back and reward us and support us at various times in our life. And I love that. Absolutely love that.
Totally.
Then you talked about your daughter, you talked about your business, and you talked about your band. And that sounds like that takes up an awful lot of basically what has been your experience in the last few years.
Totally.
What do you want to leave people with?
I want to leave people with 4 distinct thoughts. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Shout out to Ron Brotherhood.
Yes.
You have, since Ron's passed, I think it's given a lot of people pause to think about the people in their lives. So Ron, not only did you create great change when you were around, but with your passing, I think you've continued to create change. So thank you for all you've done.
Brought some people together, which was nice.
Mended some fences.
Yep.
All of that good stuff. So shout out to Ron for all you've done and all you continue to do.
Still strengthening community even as he moves away from us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Second thing I want to leave you with is go vegetarian or vegan. Don't sit on the sidelines. I know it's super inconvenient and it's kind of a pain in the ass and it's all of the things that we could say. It's literally one of the things you can do to actually really change the world. And we have all this immense power, human beings. One of the simplest things we can do is just give mercy to animals. Just give mercy to animals. And you can do that. And, I wasn't like always vegetarian. Like there was a period where I wasn't vegetarian for a long time and I came back to it and it's been a huge thing. So the second thing is like go vegetarian, go vegan. One of those things make a change. Third, punk is still absolutely the coolest thing. I love punk. I love hardcore. And although I'm not as involved in it as I was, because, my life has changed quite a bit, it's the centerpiece of everything. Without punk and hardcore, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I'm internally grateful for it. So punk and hardcore is great. Buy records, support bands, go out there. But the last thing is punk, just like anything else, is a social scene. And if we delude ourselves about that, we are inviting a lot of negative aspects. And one of the things I'd say is punk, just like anything else, has the whole social side, but there really actually is very valuable messages in there, like hugely powerful, important, life-changing messages. How you learn them and apply them is up to you. And you can be someone who looks at punk and it's just another social scene. There's nothing wrong with that. Do as you're going to do. But there's an opportunity to really sink your teeth into some super meaningful stuff and make a real change in your life and in the lives of other people. And I invite anyone here, move beyond what's on the surface and not just find out about these philosophies, but find out about how they apply to you.
Well, that's a good way to go out.
Listen to it instead.
Thanks for doing this, brother.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. Last episode of the year. Getting ready to head into 2020. I did not make any notes during the course of this episode for corrections. So if you found anything that was a mistake in that episode, it's just going to have to stand as it is. Or maybe I'll just correct it next time with whatever I get going in 2020 in terms of episodes of I've Known You Too Long. There will be something. I'm not sure. I don't have any more in the can. I've finally gotten through all of my back recordings and I've got plans, but I've also got work that has to be done. And unfortunately, that's taken precedence over a serious and repeating regular podcast schedule. But I'm still here. I still like doing it. I still have all the stuff to get it done. So we'll do it as we can. What else can I tell you? I hope 2020 turns out well. I really do. I hope to publish another book. Have you read my book? Shadow Killer? I usually have a link for it. There's a page about it on Nobody's Knows. I'd love it if you checked it out. That'd be super cool. Read it and leave me a review. Check out Cadence, One Step Beyond. We have a lot of fun with that one. We've got some really cool episodes coming up. Now, the thing with the Cadence podcast is it's about business issues. It's about leadership. Every episode might not be your cup of tea unless you're just interested in that sort of thing, to begin with. But each episode has its own unique flavor. Even the ones that we've recorded that weren't necessarily about a topic that I thought I was going to be interested in, I got something out of listening to the conversation. So For listeners of this show, when we got Chris from Cursed on there talking about, emerging markets, and he's talking about Vegan Magic, his vegan bacon grease company, yeah, I mean, you can see how that would be interesting to the audience that listens to this podcast. Or I know there's an episode coming up right away where we recorded with Jonathan Anastas from DYS and Slapshot. And half of that conversation was just about old hardcore lore and talking about the Boston scene. And half of that podcast is about how those ideas and those things that he, built up through that experience were applied to his professional life and how he's, where he's gone with his life as an adult working in the corporate world. And it's interesting to see how these things come together. So do check those out. And thanks for listening. See you next time.
This podcast is a product of the Nobody's Knows Podcast Network. Executive producers, David R. Larson and K. Drake Streetman. Music for this episode is provided by Polymorph from the album Artifacts, Demos and Debris. So I'm a snuffleupagus, but you were like this weird ghost of a dude.
I was definitely Big Bird.